thanking God this time for personal illustrations. Let's call Ezekiel chapter 7. They will know when they get caught. As we mentioned in the last chapter, this time God is going to cut through their excuses by catching them red-handed in the midst of the wrong that they were doing. And in this chapter, I'm pretty much just going to follow the ESV's paragraph breaks and basically tell you the paragraphs for me are complicated enough that I don't think this is going to be a great summary. So I'm going to stick to two things, hopefully to help us out. One, the themes that I'll deal with at the end. But before then, just the things that stood out to me in each section as I do my best to summarize them, beginning in verses 1 through 4. He's going to talk about the way that the end has come. One of those recurring themes that I forgot to mention. The three themes that I think are kind of recurring are the way that the time has come for him to expose what they have been doing, at which point, once again, they will know that he is God. But going back to verses 1 through 4, he is going to say the time has come for the end, or the end has come upon the four corners of the land. The four corners of the land catching my attention because in the Revelation, as we have said, the prophets in a lot of ways mirror the revelation to come. But in the Revelation, the four corners of the earth are a thing in the end times of the earth. Likewise, here in verses 1 through 4, the four corners of the land are a thing in the end, or the end that God has prophesied for the people of Judah. Verses 5 through roughly 9, saying that that end is going to be marked by disaster after disaster, similar to what we noticed with the whole concept of Murphy's Law. Everything that can go wrong or that seems to be able to go wrong will go wrong. Here, it's going to be like waves crashing on the beach, except it's going to be disaster after disaster crashing against them. As verses 10 through 13 are going to talk about, once again, that issue of timing. Not that it was skipped in verses 5 through 8, because he's going to say in verse 7, the time has come for them to basically pay up on the wrong that they've been doing. Once again, in verses 10 through 13, he's going to talk about that issue of time from the perspective of budding, meaning they've had a lot of wrongdoing that has been growing up into a judgment that is now budding and is now on deck. Verses 14 through roughly 22, marking a shift where he's no longer talking about this being the time for them to be exposed as much as he is talking about what is going to be exposed. Having referenced, I guess, a little bit in verses 10 through 13, the fact that their preeminence and their wealth are no longer going to be able to save them. Now he's going to talk about the way that they have misused the blessings, the material blessings that God had given them for twisted purposes. And so he's going to emphasize that roughly around, I think it was verse 19, saying they cast their silver into the streets and their gold is like an unclean thing. Their silver and their gold are not able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of the Lord. They cannot satisfy their hunger or fill their stomachs with it, for it was the stumbling block of their iniquity. Verse 20. His beautiful ornament they used for pride. They made their abominable images and their detestable things of it. Therefore, I make it an unclean thing to them. Verses 23 through the end of the chapter, verse 27, going on to talk about the way that having once ignored God, they are now going to seek to have a word from the prophets, but they're going to have no word from the prophets. They're going to have no insight from the priest, no insight from their leaders or the elders. Understanding that that time is all past, the chapter is going to conclude in verse 27 saying, the king mourns, the prince is wrapped in despair, and the hands of the people of the land are paralyzed by terror. According to their way, I will do to them, and according to their judgments, I will judge them. And they shall know that I am the Lord. Going back to that familiar theme we mentioned, going back to chapter 6. There, God seeming to cut through their excuses by leaving them desolate. Here, God seeming to cut through their excuses by catching them in the middle of their wrongdoing. Specifically in verse 4, where he will say, and my eye will not spare you, nor will I have pity, but I will punish you for your ways, while your abominations are in your midst. Then you will know that I am the Lord. Similar to what he says in verse 9, where it says, and my eye will not spare, nor will I have pity. I will punish you according to your ways, while your abominations are in your midst. Then you will know that I am the Lord who strikes. Something that catches my attention because earlier today, I was in one of those Isaiah type, man of unclean lips type tirades because I've been going through some man of unclean lips type drama. And so that is no excuse for me to let it get to my temper and my tongue. But I was in the middle of one and I had to apologize to a brother just in case he overheard my rant. Understanding that unpleasant moments like that combined with chapters like this actually give us an opportunity to hopefully beg God to help us not let our unpleasant moments turn into unpleasant habits. But to the degree they have turned into unpleasant habits, likewise, to ask God to help us, give us a heart to gently break us out of those habits so that no matter how stressed we are in life, we do not let stress or even worse, pride or a sense of entitlement, as we see here in verse 24, get us into the kinds of habits that God has to expose in order to break us of. The kinds of habits that are made even more rigid by excuses or the kinds of things we can use to justify the wrongs that we do. The very thing that God is breaking Judah of in this chapter reminds me of why we sometimes say, my prayer for you is my prayer for me. God, please give us a heart to humbly seek your help in letting go of our excuses so that, God willing, we can look forward to the time in which you are rewarding us for what we have done, not so much punishing us for it.